Ladies and gentlemen, members of AVAAN and esteemed honoraries and advisory board of AVAAN, my name is Anil Neopane, one of the co-founders and Secretary General of AVAAN, and I'll be your host for this morning. I would like to extend the warmest welcome in this very cold morning to everyone who is present here to hear from Alec Sokolow. So can we give a round of applause for Alec, please? Who is the Academy Award nominated screenwriter who gave us Woody and Buzz Lightyear, who are among the most iconic and loved characters to ever appear in the animation world. Thank you, Alec. Before we start the interaction program with Alec, I would like to start with the introduction of AVAAN. Animation and VFX Artists Association of Nepal is a collective platform formed to unite, empower, and uplift Nepal's animation and VFX community, which we are all here right now. Dedicated to skill development, fair practices, and global collaboration, AVAAN works to strengthen the industry through training, mentorship, advocacy, and networking. By bringing artists, studios, and storytellers together, AVAAN aims to build a sustainable, world-class creative ecosystem from Nepal to the global stage. I always say that animators and VFX artists are one of the most introverted species of humankind, right? We find comfort in spending countless hours in front of our computer. But because of this nature of ours, we are often overlooked and undermined. Therefore, AVAAN is here to bring all the brilliant artists together and become our voice. We are proud to recall that AVAAN is one of the 11 associations listed under the Film Development Board of Nepal, under the government of Nepal. Sorry. Our long-term vision is to be able to work on the government's policy level to uplift the creative industry, and because of FDV's inclusion and support, we are one step closer to that goal. In the last 6 months, AVAAN has organized a large-scale interaction program with Mr. Jeremy Vickery, the lighting mentor and Pixar alumni. We've also conducted online webinars with Mr. Karun Thapa sir, Nepal's first 3D animator, and Mr. Kirti Kesar Joshi sir, a veteran 2D animator with incredible experience. Both of those videos, one of them is already online on our YouTube channel. The second one is coming soon this week. And I promise you, we're just getting started. We already have a roster of amazing personalities ready to share their experience with us budding artists. And AVAAN is also blessed with the guidance of some of the industry's most experienced and respected veterans who were kind enough to join us as honoraries and advisory board of AVAAN. We'd like to take a moment to recognize and honor them with Khada and Nepali Topi. Can somebody please volunteer? He is also the advisory at Ministry of Culture and Fine Arts, Cambodia. He contributed to the animation industry of Nepal by bringing popular animated show Moomin. Can we give it up for Moomin, please? And directing its Nepali version. Moomin has seriously inspired and shaped the mindset of most of today's animators from Nepal. Next, we have Mr. Kirti Kesar Joshi as honorary advisor, who is a pioneer of 2D animation in Nepal. He worked as early era 2D cell animator and contributed in highly notable children's show known as Meena Cartoon. Can we give it up for Meena Cartoon, please? We also have Mr. Suege Mantuladar as our honorary advisor, who is a veteran animator and founder of Black Box Animation Academy and Fire Studios. He has mentored countless young animators and contributed in the growth of animation industry in Nepal. In the advisory board, we have Mr. Karun Thapa, sir, who is a pioneer of 3D animation of Nepal. He is also an IT expert, film editor, mentor, and wonderfully a brilliant lyricist. You have to check out his ghazals. And most importantly, I would like to take a moment to honor Alec Sokolow, who is our chief guest and guest of honor today, who has graced us with his presence and knowledge. Again, thank you all honorable members for being a part of AVAAN and for gracing us with your presence today, and also helping us shape the future of creative industry. Speaking of which, we would like to take a moment to recognize some of the major animation and VFX specialized studios who have joined the membership of AVAAN. So I would like to request Mr. Karun Thapa sir to hand over certificate to our esteemed studios. Certificate pani ल्याइदिनु त. First, I'll take the name, and please, the representatives who are present from the respective studios, please come on board to receive the certificate. First, we have Dreams Animation Academy and Studios, a leading animation academy and professional studio dedicated to 3D animation, VFX, AR, VR, gaming, and producing industry-ready artists and creative content. Based outside of Valley in Banepa and founded in 2014. Next, we have QI Animation Studios, a creative animation studio focused on high-quality, story-driven 3D animation, visual storytelling, and collaborative production work. Founded in 2021. Next, we have Puppeteer Lounge, an international animation training and content platform known for character animation, rigging expertise, workshops, and original animated series Nani and Babu, founded in 2011. Next, we have Jazz Productions, one of Nepal's recognized film and media production houses producing commercials, films, music videos, and CGI-based visual content, founded in 2014. Next, we have Maya Animation Academy, one of Nepal's oldest and most established animation and VFX institutes, committed to professional training and skill development, founded in 2005. Is there any representative from Maya? Okay. Next, we have 77 Labs, a creative technology studio working on innovative digital content, experimental storytelling, and modern media solutions. 77 Labs, they haven't reached? Okay. Next, we have Archive Games and Animation, a game development and animation studio specializing in educational games, interactive media, and animated digital experiences, founded in 2010. Uh, 77 Labs, Rofia from 77 Labs, please come on board. Can we give a round of applause for 77 Labs, please? Next, we have Animsomaniac Animation Academy, which is a Nepal-based 3D character animation, 3D learning platform, 3D animation for TV, video games, online school, founded in 2021. We have Animesh representing Animsomaniac. Now that we know the faces behind the amazing studios, let's take a moment to check out their works in the form of very short sizzle reels.
Come on, let's go. Come on, don't you want to be a hero? Well, I don't know where you're from, but here in America, we try to get on the TV. Let's do it!
Hi, mon cat.
Isn't that impressive? And here we were thinking there's no animation industry in Nepal. Mind you, these reels belong to the studios that have joined AVAAN membership only. Trust me when I say there are even more amazing studios currently working in Nepal, and we are conducting outreach programs to onboard them onto AVAAN. All right, now let's move on to the main event, the reason we are all here. On November 22, 1995, the world saw something it had never seen before. Something spectacular. A fully computer animated feature film called Toy Story. That didn't just showcase groundbreaking technology, but told a deeply human story that resonated to people across generations. Toy Story went on to reshape the animation industry and redefine what animated films could achieve emotionally, narratively, and commercially. One of the original writers behind the landmark film, Alec Sokolow, is an Academy Award-nominated screenwriter whose work helped establish character-driven storytelling as the foundation of modern animation. By anchoring universal themes of identity, friendship, and belonging, his writing influenced how stories are developed not only in animation but across live-action cinema as well. Since Toy Story, Mr. Sokolow has built a prolific career spanning animation, live-action, and television, consistently championing strong characters, clear structure, and emotionally honest storytelling that continues to inspire filmmakers and artists worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Alec Sokolow on the stage. I need volunteers to form the chair.
Global. You don't have to explain what a toy is. You don't have to explain the relationship that a child has with the toy. So you have this like other incredible just unifying principle of how you can make it accessible. Then you add the fact that if you start to actually just play this game of what, and we did this back in the day, when is a glass happy? Right? You start to put emotions on things, right? Is a glass happy when it's empty? Is a glass happy when it's full? Is a glass happy when it's being used? He started applying that to toys, and it pretty much just created this natural hierarchy, right? And so, like in Toy Story, the power greater than Buzz or Woody was Andy. That's really important in storytelling. What is the power greater than your protagonist? And so those three things are very simple, but it's hard to get that right seamlessly, and having to explain it hurts the ability for the story to kind of travel around the world and through time and space. And so I think we got really lucky or fortunate. Pixar back in the day was developing Render Man, and in real time they had a clock ticking on their funding from continuing funding from Disney to show proof of concept with the technology while we were writing the script. And so what do I think made Toy Story great? I think those things on the page, those things creatively, and then I also do believe we had the benefit of Disney's distribution and their marketing, which is incredibly important, but we were really left alone. We did not have a lot of oversight from Disney. It was almost like we were the side thing because their business at the time was not computer-generated animation. So I think it was just like, some good fortune, but also I think some really solid, universally understood emotional stakes.
Thank you, Alec. So as a writer, what excites you the most, plot, character, or theme of the movie? I know you specialize in character-driven storytelling, so can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, so I think everything is character. I think plot is a function of character. I think the universe is a function of character. I think you start with character. And when I think of character, and you have Garfield there, and you have Evan there, and whatever Steve Martin's character's name is in that, I forget at the moment. You start with, like, what are their emotional stakes? What are their definitions? Without kind of getting too into the woods with it, you really start almost at a psychological, I worked for a long time with a writing partner, Joel Cohen, not of the Coen brothers, he quickly wanted to point out. But we always talked about characters' Freuds, what is the, deep down, what is the motivational drive and or fear that character has? And we start there, and then if we find power greater than that character in the universe, it starts to feel like you can tell a story. Garfield, which was and is a comic strip that predated my involvement with it, it still has, it's a cat and it's owner, or it's human. And in there, Garfield, and it was not my invention, but it was like, he was a lazy cat. He hates Mondays. He loves lasagna. And he kind of, in a very Tao of Garfield, wins by doing nothing. Wins by just being zen out. So, in that case, it's like, what a great character, right? So I would say, for anybody, think about the character, and my bias is American, my bias is Hollywood. Think about the character, hopefully rising above the cultural significance of the character and instead the universality of those motivations.
So you write for animation and live action as well. So how does the writing process change when a story will be animated rather than live action, and vice versa?
In some ways it doesn't change. I've had a very crazy 2025 where I've actually written 4 screenplays, which is a lot for me. I'll tell you, one is based in 1938, live action, based on a true story about in New York City, the American Nazi Party was rising, and the powers that be in New York City went to the Jewish mafia and said, can you take care of them? Live action, think Godfather, right? One is for a German animation company, and it was about a squirrel in Central Park whose father gets abducted by aliens. The aliens hiding in pigeon suits. That's animation. One is for an English animation company, and it's the story of a little girl who gets lost in her cell phone. And then one is a live action for a Swedish company, and it is a prequel to Pippi Longstocking, but it's a Pirates of the Caribbean live action set in the South Seas around 1950. So I've been in New York in 1938. I've been in outer space. I've been inside a cell phone in a parallel universe, and I've been in Papua New Guinea in 1950. 2 live action, 2 animation. What I feel is in everything is there's a reason why animation is so brilliant, and that is it shows you either a world that you never saw before, or it shows you your world in a way you've never seen it before. And there's a general rule of thumb of they ask, why does it have to be animated? And for me, it's because you want to like be free from the gravity of physics. You want to be free from time and space, and you want to just kind of follow emotions in the storytelling and hopefully introduce just magic in a universe. And when I'm writing that, I get lost in that. I can't tell you why, but I've always I have a very active imagination, I guess. I can get lost in that. Live action, you deal with this idea that you're gonna have to get actors. And in getting actors, you have to write to the actors. So the actual philosophy of writing changes. It's called writing to your star, writing to your A character. And I kind of design the scenes and I design the action a little bit more, making sure I'm giving actors moments. I actually woke up this morning, the one set in 1938. Have a director, have a producer, we're going out to actors. And I woke up to the note we just got passed by Miles Teller. And the director was saying, the main character disappears for 10 pages. And I'm thinking, who gives a shit, right? Like why? I don't care about that. But I get it, because you're dealing with egos. There's another movie that I wrote called Money Talks, and Chris Tucker was the star of that, or one of the stars of that. And Chris, the character, it was a spec script. The character was originally had a girlfriend who was about to get married, and the girlfriend was 8 months pregnant. And the first note Chris said was, I don't want to act with a pregnant actress. So now she was like 2 weeks pregnant. So you deal with that. I think there was an old story that evidently Alfred Hitchcock and Walt Disney once had a conversation where Alfred Hitchcock said to him, you really got it right, because if your actors bother you, you can just erase them.
So, like I said, if you had to choose, unlimited resources or anything at all, you only had to choose either live action or animation to write for the rest of your life. What would your choice be? Don't do your head.
I can't answer. I'm 62. I started my career when I was 23. I thought I was going to write one script, and that was it. And then I was going to get on, it was going to get made, and everything's going to be great. I've written like 80 scripts, so I don't really have a preference. To me, it's storytelling. What I do find is there's a lot more joy at the end of the day with animation. There's a lot more universal joy and acceptance, and there's also a chance for it to live longer. And so, if I use those metrics, I would say animation, but I am kind of addicted to telling stories, and I'm a very process-driven thinker, and so I think about that. My typical day, wake up, coffee, little exercise, which I think is important because it's such a sedentary life. And then I turn on the computer and I go. And I go until my brain gets mushy, and then I stop, take a walk, take a nap, have to turn it on again, and I go. And I've done that for 40 years. I don't know how that happened. I really don't. That's part of the fun of the journey, And so when I'm designing a script, I don't have all the answers, but I kind of have the flags that I need, or the places I need to hit in my journey. And by the end of it, the end of the storytelling is actually the beginning of the rest of the world. The transformation has happened. So I kind of use that. I forget what the question was, but in my process, that's how I look at what I'm doing.
I was asking how do you impose limitations on your character?
Well, because when you start dealing with that, logic, it really becomes very clear, especially if you follow the character, what does that character need at any one point? And I don't impose limitations, but I do know you can't be redundant, you can't use dialogue to kind of show, you got to show, not do, and you have to test that character. You don't want that character to be ahead of the storytelling. You don't want that character to know what's going to happen. You want that character to live in a vacuum of storytelling so that they're forced into action. They're forced, when they actually get into like hero's journey stuff, the leap into the special world, the leap into the second act is a leap where that character has no control, no power, and they have to act. And we talked about this when we met, but it's Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars, right? Which is classic hero's journey storytelling. When he leaps into action, he has no idea. He's the most powerful person or character in that universe. He doesn't know, and the fun from an audience point of view is watching him discover that. And so I don't impose limitations, but I know pacing is really important. American pacing in storytelling tends to be a little quicker than other parts of the world. The audiences get more impatient. There's more screens, there's more clickbait stuff. So you really have to grab somebody and never let them go, and just don't be boring. I think movies are like roller coasters. Like you hear about a roller coaster in an amusement park, and you think, oh, that's cool. I think I want to go on that. And you hear people say, that's really good. And then you go to the park and you wait online and you see people come off and you get really excited. And then you go on it. And if it's 10% better than you thought, that's the greatest roller coaster that ever existed. And if it's 10% worse, it sucks. All right? And I think movies are like that. I think we have brains that are always predicting the future. And the real fun and kind of challenge of storytelling is to not be predictable, but still stay on those rails.
So, I write as well, and I heard somewhere, I don't remember, that sometimes writers have this moment, writers have this moment with the characters, with the world, with the story, that you write and then you're like, oh my god, did that character just say that? Did that just happen? It didn't come from me. How did that even get there? So I haven't had that moment, so have you had that kind of moment?
All right, well, you're talking about like a philosophical thing about creation. And I do believe this, and I think that there's a miracle that happens in creation. I think every time every one of us sits down at the beginning of the day, we have intentions, we have a punch list of things we want to do, but somewhere in there, a miracle happens, right? You channel something, you find something, your brain opens up, your heart opens up, and I have no idea where it comes from, but if you get yourself right, that can happen. So I don't know. I'm always, even to now, I'll finish a day. The hard part, and I'm sure this is true with everybody, the hard part is you spend a lot of time alone. So it's like there's a lot of sign, like the one hand clapping, right? Like the day ends, you're like, I don't know, like I didn't get a reaction. And in the case of the work I do, it may take 3 to 5 years for me to see that reaction. Toy Story, I wrote Toy Story with Joel in 1992. It came out in 95. That was 3 years of not knowing if it was going to work, 3 years of comic failure of trying to be an artist that made money, and 3 years of kind of having to let go of it and do other things. So who knows? Like that's the miracle, right? That's the mystery.
So we're like radio trying to channel the frequency where the stories are floating around?
I do think that. I think for me, like I can almost remember every single movie I've ever gone to see. I remember who I've been with, and I remember the experience. I can't remember people's names. I can't remember like my schedule. I can't remember other shit. I remember that, right? And I've always wanted to like leap on the screen. So I kind of am a sponge, right? And I've seen, thousands of movies and TV shows, probably like everybody, but I retain them. So what do I think when it's time to create? I think Andy Warhol said art is theft. And so I'm stealing, but I'm stealing hopefully in original ways.
That's what I'm a very forgetful person myself. The other day I forgot my neighbor. I couldn't recognize him. I see every day. So right now clicked to me that I want to console myself saying that I keep the space for stories, in my mind. So yeah. Before moving to the next question, I would like to request if you guys take some pictures, and if you post them online on your stories, on your post, do mention AVAAN Nepal, and most importantly mention Nepali Gar Hotel. They were really generous enough to let us have this event here. So please can you give a round of applause for Nepali Gar Hotel? And post mention Gardiner, right? So as animators, we tend to rely a lot on spectacle, and our visuals tend to overpower the narrative actually. And as a writer, do you get to sit with the technical team and discuss your vision, or is it like handing over the script to the director, producer, and they take it from there and see it once the movie is made?
So a career in Hollywood, you get very siloed. I like, it's a factory, and you play a specific role. And so for years, when I worked exclusively in the Hollywood system, I handed stuff off, and always said if I could be helpful, I'm here. But my job's done when everybody else's job starts. So I kind of took that approach. But even in there, the technical side, the artistry, all of those things, and you kind of know, like, in a way, like what audience you're trying to get, and then what audience you're hoping to get. And I think a lot of the decisions that happen creatively are made on those decisions. You guys know with animation, like with the iterations and with the rendering and with it kind of like the way characters kind of sit in the universe and the density of visual information, that does affect storytelling, right? The breakthrough with RenderMan was that it just added so much more visual density. It allowed you to be more creative because they could do it, right? In other cases, when I worked on things that were lower budget, maybe I'm a little bit more aware of what the technical limitations are at the beginning, and it's not that I don't try and go for things, but I know that it's important to just follow the character, and that sometimes you're not going to be able to put everything on the screen at all times. So I prefer working all through the process. I prefer working and knowing the technical possibilities and with the team. But I also think, it's like we're all part of a team, and we all have to do our job. And my job is to create something on the page that is a work of art, but is a blueprint for production, and really perhaps a blueprint for marketing and raising budget. So I see that's those are my main core objectives.
In your experience, what makes a character emotionally memorable long after the film ends? I know I've written a lot of questions about characters because I want to get in your head about it. And also, what's your approach to writing characters that appeal both to children and adults without feeling forced?
I'm going to answer the second one first. In my experience, kids follow the plot and the action, and grown-ups tend to follow the sensibility and the humor and the wit and other things. So I feel like you need to have plot, you need to have things that are understandable, but if you want to try and entertain multiple ages, groups, and everything, it's important to just bring as much wit as possible. Like, I don't know if you guys know Masha and the Bear. It's a Russian IP. I love Masha and the Bear. Storytelling is simple, but the creators of Masha and the Bear obviously have a love relationship with old silent movies in America, because there's so much gags, there's so much humor that I recognize I saw that as a kid, or I saw that they're referencing things, and so I get the satisfaction as a grown-up of watching it, whereas a kid might just watch whatever the emotional stakes are. So I think that's important. The second thing is, and I did not study this when I was at university, and I did not know that this would be kind of an obsession of mine, but you start looking at like the entirety of life and how people change and how emotions change, and you realize that like when you're trying to entertain kids, 0 to 5, geometric shapes, very safe, little exploration, just little connections, right? 5 to 10, you start getting into some kind of operational stages of emotional development. That's kind of what happened with with buzz, if you will. Like, you show up, it's a big world, you don't know what's going on, and by the end of the story, you realize where you fit in the world. Kind of, I'm gonna say 8 to 14, there's like this orphan fantasy that Charles Dickens kind of, I think, really did great. And that is that, like, children at that age tend to realize that it is a big world and that grown-ups can't solve their problems, you know, purely, that they have to solve their problems. And then when you push past like 13 or 14, you're dealing with teenagers, you're dealing with a dissidence, you're dealing with other emotions, you're dealing with other kind of social math. And that changes the storytelling, you know? So what I've always tried to do is again, target the age group, figure out where their emotional satisfaction or fear is, and then throw other things in for adults, like Cheaper by the Dozen. You know, Cheaper by the Dozen, we have kids, you know, young, and we have teenagers or college-age kids, but really, like, the spine of that movie was understanding that we needed a movie star, Steve Martin, and Bonnie Hunt was the other actress, and it's really like his story, right? And it's the allegory of, in a modern world, as a father, can you reach for your dreams while still being a father, right? That was like the DNA of Cheaper by the Dozen. And then you just throw all the jokes with all the kids, and you just kind of track all that stuff. And if you actually look at really where that movie got to, the ending is like a smoke and mirrors ending. A kid runs away, but it was like cataclysmic. But it was because Steve Martin's character had to choose between career and family. And then the whole family comes together, and then there's this like really nice, warm, family reaffirming thing. And that movie is probably the most satisfying movie that I've been a part of from the point of view of the finished product touched people from 8 to 8, and everybody found something that they like, you know.
Right, so I want to ask a bit of abstract question. I'm trying to figure this out myself as well. So when a story comes to you, or when you have like a idea, so is it normally that you have a word where you then figure out, like word or a plot point, and then you figure out, okay, I need this character with this flaw or this need and want to go through to make the change? Or do you first come up with a character with all the description that you just said, okay, is this and this, he has this problem and this flaws, and then you figure out the plot later to make him change in his character arc? Or is it like a mixed process? How does it normally work with you?
It's mixed, but I would say, I always start, and you know, who is the protagonist or protagonist, and really what are the emotional stakes of that protagonist, and that can come with like pressures from the universe, or that can come from pressures from emotions or something, but understanding, I said before, that there's something greater than that character that is pushing that character, and I think in those terms, and then just personally, and I've done so much screenwriting, and even I helped Activision do Skylanders, you know, back 15 years ago. I'm just fascinated with like, oh, here's a new platform to tell a story with, and here's a new universe. And so I'm big into that. Like, if I don't know it, I get kind of nervous, which excites me, which makes me curious, and then I pursue it. But from an organic place, it's mixed, but I need to know the backdrop, and I need to know the emotional stakes of the protagonist. And that's that simple.
It's mostly about the character, right?
It always comes back to, well, think about this. Like, think about all the things that we've all watched, right? And, you know, you can tell somebody the plot of something, but that you can't really tell them why you liked it, right? It's the plot is just a function. It's just something. It's just something. It's dominoes that fall, and it really is. You want to earn the journey. I actually think, from an audience's point of view, one of the things I've learned is the only thing an audience requires is knowing why they're seeing something, and they don't need to know in the moment, but after the fact, they need to say, that's why they chose to show me that. And to me, when I think of movies or TV shows or video games even that satisfy me, it's because I feel like I was being brought along and everything in there was there for the right reason. So it's logic, right? It's just logic.
Yeah, it is a bit abstract. At what point do you consciously think about structure? Is it when you have an idea, or you're trying to create a character, the world, or is it an outline stage, or during rewrites, you wrote a story and you'll be like, okay, I need to put it into a structure, into the hero journey combat, so do you rewrite it in that way, or does it just come naturally to you after all these years?
No, I have a little checklist before I start writing. I need to know the first 5 minutes, start with like an opening sequence that's going to grab somebody, how I'm going to introduce my protagonist, how am I going to introduce my antagonist. I don't need to know exactly, but I need to know that. I need to know what is that inciting incident or call to action. I need to know the first act break, which is the moment when that character is going to leap into, so the way I just would define it, it was told to me, but I agree with it, a first act break is the character kind of leaps into, your protagonist leaps into action in a way that will forever change them or the world. And once they make that leap, they're in that world where they have no power, but they have the desire to figure out something. It works with like romantic comedies. It works with everything, right? I need to kind of figure that stuff out. Then you get into that second act, and I like to think about 2 or 3 what used to be called set pieces or trailer moments or whatever you want to call it, sequences that can propel the story. I don't need to know exactly what they are, but it could be as simple as I need a chase here, I need a bar fight here, I need something, right? I just keep that in my head. I need to know the end of the second act before I start writing, before I really get excited. And that is, going back to that hero's journey, that's that kind of like, what is the worst fear that is now being realized? What is the dragon that has to get slayed? What is the thing? Robert McKee, who taught screenwriting classes at America for 30 years, would call it the negation of the negation, which was a fancy way of saying, what is the worst nightmare that the protagonist has, and that's going to then propel the end of the storytelling. And that tends to be something where, as the protagonist gets closer to solving their mission, the stakes rise and becomes like a Sophie's Choice, where there's like, it's going to be impossible to figure it out. And then in the miracle of movie storytelling, you figure it out. In Toy Story, said simply, we needed to have Andy's mom moving. We needed to have the moving day. That's like the pressure. And we needed the toys to ultimately confront Sid and somehow get back to Andy. And in those moments when you look at that story, and Toy Story 1 was Woody's story, right? Purely Woody's story emotionally. He's the one that really Buzz transformed, but like Woody, he was the spine. Toy Story 2 was Buzz's story. But in there, the end of that second act, we're like, oh my God, let's get to this point where Sid's gonna like blow up, who's gonna blow up? I think Buzz, right? Woody was on the fire barbecue, and it's movie day, right? And that was enough, right? Like that was enough to know, all right, now we're gonna drive to an ending. And then once you get into that third act, and third acts to me, in my own writing process, are the least interesting to write, because it's just like, all right, I just gotta finish the story now.
To summarize, make your story different while still going into the idea that every story is the same. That makes sense.
All right, well, it does make sense. So I'm gonna say this, right? Here, like when I think about the blessing that I've had in spending my earthly existence telling stories and getting paid for it, like fulfilling my life, I actually do believe we're all telling the same story. It's the same exact story. And it's a story really about connection or isolation. It's that simple. Every story is either a character starts isolated, either emotionally or physically or metaphysically or whatever, and moves towards connection, or a character starts, usually your antagonist, isolated and stays isolated. And so I think, like, whatever our needs are as a species, we need these stories to reaffirm that our lives have purpose and meaning and that we're on the right path. But it is really a story of connection. every story is, you know, it's either a connection with yourself or a connection with somebody else, which is really a connection with yourself. Or so I think every story is the same. As far as tropes, I don't know. I think it's just a feeling of, you know, if you're being cliche, right? It's kind of the sniff test, right? If you know anybody could have done that moment, and it flattens the writing a little bit, it flattens the storytelling. You know, it's just a feel thing, kind of, but I'm very self-critical, and believe me, I'm comically, although pleasantly tortured when I'm writing, where I have a lot of middle of the night epiphanies, and really, you know, somebody asked me this question the other day, and I'll give the answer, not the question, but when I'm done with something, I let go of it. I'm done. I'm like, and it's because I've gone through all of that stuff, and it's the best I could do at that moment. And done doesn't mean done, it just means done for now, right? So, you know, it's gonna change, a new perspective's gonna come on, there's gonna be a collaboration, there's gonna be something that alters the progression of storytelling. But what do I think about tropes? I think it's a feel. Like, you know, because, you know, there was a year, it was like in the late 80s in America, where there were 3 body switch comedies that came out within 2 months. One of them was a huge hit, and 2 of them didn't work, right? And I remember thinking, well, why did that one work? They're telling the same exact story. It's just because they had more fun telling the story. It just worked. It just was like, it was more enjoyable to watch. They were telling the same exact beat for beat thing, right? So it's just a feel, I think.
That makes sense. So moving on from the hero's journey, what happens when visual departments, and especially talking about animation, fall in love with a sequence that doesn't serve the story? How should a writer respond?
Rewriting is killing your babies, right? Like we all have our babies, we all make our babies, we all fall in love with them, and then, you know, I think there's, you know, good is important, great is better than good, but right is the ultimate goal. And just, you know, have a little ego death, you know, and understand that if you did something, you might be able to repurpose it later. I can't tell you the number of things, you know, but when I write a rough draft or a first draft, I overwrite it. You know, it always ends up 10 pages longer than I want it to be, or 20 pages longer. And then I edit, and then I cut it, and I kind of play the game. Can I tell this story without this? Would anybody miss it but me? And if the answer is I can, I get rid of it, and I put it into a file and might revisit it.
So you kill it yourself without letting anybody else kill it for you. So how do you balance creative vision with studio expectation? Now talking about your Hollywood experience, especially on big IP-driven projects.
All right, so I think this is true professionally, but I think it's true personally. When you put your hand out asking for money, you get more than money, you get an opinion. And, you know, you have to expect that opinion, and you have to respect it. Anybody that pays me, I want to make them happy. If I disagree with them, I've kind of taken the approach, I will tell them why they're wrong, but I won't tell them why they're wrong in a way that makes them feel cornered. I will do it saying, you know, it's an interesting thought, but perhaps if you thought it this way, you would see like these other things. But, you know, I provide a service professionally, and I think it's really important. Like, look around this room when you get a chance, you probably already have. These are your brothers and sisters, right? You're gonna spend a lot of time with all of these people, idea to idea, project to project. So you learn to play nice, right? You learn to kind of, like, we're in a sandbox together, and there's no right way, and the goal is to go through this bizarre miracle of creation and production, and hopefully have it have value through time and space, and then hopefully be given the chance to do it again. So I kind of see everything in life as an audition, including this moment, and I kind of look at it like it's an opportunity to share in something. When I work for the studios, you know, here's Hollywood is a very unhealthy culture. It's a very toxic culture, and you know, you can look at the stuff that's on TV, you can look at the award shows, you can read the magazines, and you think it's some version of that, and it's not. It's a factory town. It's a transactional community. It's what was that animated movie that said art a product, and you are going to get exploited, and you're not going to necessarily get exploited in ways that nourish you. So I lasted as long as I was born and raised in New York City. I moved out to LA. I lived in LA for 30 years. I've been back in New York for about 10 years. I got out of there because I was like, I can't, I'm a zombie when I left, right? And so Hollywood's like, it's corporate. Unfortunately, it's like, there's less open competition because companies are merging and stuff, and it's marketing, and it's really kind of a soulless place, and anytime something good comes out of it, it's an accident, in my opinion.
And you've been working with a lot of creators all over the world now, outside of Hollywood as well. So what's your experience there as opposed to Hollywood?
I think that on a core level, storytelling is storytelling, but I think what actually happens, and this is the big kind of American cultural imperialism and stuff, like Hollywood wants to like eat everything, and so I kind of come from the approach of like, let's go big, let's go, and we're gonna go around, we're gonna do like these massive things. And when I've worked in different film communities or different countries, you find that like, sometimes there's an aversion to kind of taking chances, the same chances in countries that have governments and bureaucrats that kind of either have to sign off on things or have to kind of make sure there's a lot of employment. The storytellers really don't necessarily want to take the same kind of risks because they need that. And so it's kind of a different thing. And I also think, and I say it kind of self-effacingly, but like, I'm a shiny object, right? I'm a nice shiny object, right? I can come in here and, it's cool, you guys all showed up. That's amazing, right? But I don't know what the rudiments of the business is here, right? I don't know the hurdles here that you guys might inherently know. And if the goal is to tell stories around the world, then that also kind of means maybe having to reinvent the very sandbox you're playing in, which may be really hard, and because your audience is your audience, and it just gets into this whole like tug of war thing on some level of like, what's a good idea and where will it get shown and what's the budget and all those things. So I kind of take the approach, just personally and kind of selfishly, that like I get to go on this like exploration in different cultures, and just the process is going to just storytelling, but the process is going to reveal itself, like the limitations and the aspirations and stuff. So I try not to like bring like, when I am employed by a Hollywood studio, I know that they're gonna get it out into the world. I know and by the way, they're gonna like, they're gonna screw me financially, right? Like there's this weird paradox where they pay you up front. It's very much like prostitution, I think. Like they pay you up front, but they pay you to leave and not tell anybody, right? Like they pay you to kind of like, you're gonna get screwed, but it's all right, because we still love you, If you want your stories to travel, think about those things. Think about the things that we all can understand. Think about what it's like to be a toy with a boy, or a cat with an owner, or a dad with 12 kids, or it's make-believe. Just think about it, right? Think of it, and it'll turn out that if you feel it and you've experienced it, and you can be very kind of exact and drill down on that, chances are everybody else has. That's not, like, we all are living some version of the same, same life experience, We start young and stupid and happy, and then we get wisdom, which scares us, and then we realize we're gonna die, and then, we live our life trying to, not die, I guess,
So even though culture and context may be specific, I guess emotion is what's universal, and we focus on that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I'm driven by emotional stakes in my life, but also really in the stories I try and tell, and that is what unifies us. You know, I for some reason Kung Fu Panda is in my head, and Kung Fu Panda, complete Disney thing, kind of benign racism and all that stuff. The Disney, the cultural appropriation, all the words that like, but it's a movie that works. And why does that movie work? Well, Kung Fu's cool, pandas are cute, but the real reason is there's a father-son story, in my opinion, right? There's something we all can relate to. I want to go live my dream, and my dad is telling me no. My dad, when I wanted to be a screenwriter, and I came from a family that was kind of in the culture in New York City, my dad used to say, I want you to reach for the stars, but keep one foot on the ground. You know, I want you to go try, but like, don't. That's chimera, right? That's like, who knows if that's gonna work? You need something that's solid, right? And the only time I ever really fought with my father when I was right out of university, I needed to get out to LA, in my opinion. I needed to start my career. That to me was going to be the Emerald City in Oz. That was going to be everything. And my pop was like, you can't go out there without a job. And I was like, how can I get a job if I'm not out there? Just pre-internet, right? And we fought. And I even to this day, I feel ashamed of some of the things I said in the passion of that moment. But I understand it now because I have a 29 and 26-year-old, and I get it now. So it's the cycle, right?
So if you were starting today in a country with growing animation industry like Nepal, what would you prioritize? Is it skills, community, or original IP?
Make something good.
So what keeps you excited about writing after decades in the industry?
All right, for me, and I think this is true for most people, other than my kids, it's the greatest aspect of consciousness is to tell stories and to write. And the fear of it, that turns into the celebration of it, that turns into the catharsis. Like I'm addicted to it, so time and space stops. Like if there were no mirrors, I would feel like I was 18 still, right? And so, I don't know, I can't imagine. We all tell stories, right? We're telling stories and how we dress and what our resume looks like and who we know. And it's all fake, right? You know, we're in a country that kind of celebrates that philosophy, I think. It's all a mindset, right? And so I can't imagine, people, like, I get this a lot, right? Like, are you still writing? When I see somebody I haven't seen for a while, are you still writing? And I'm like, are you still breathing? Like, it's like, like, what do you mean? Like, what else is there to do,
It's who you are, right?
Oh, it's a terminal career.
So finally, before you open the floor, what's one storytelling principle you believe every artist, writer, animator, or filmmaker should never forget?
If only one, I would say communication is both the sending and the receiving of a message. And it's easy to focus on one, but you need both. So understand that what you're trying to do is going to be received as well. And that's part of the great jigsaw puzzle of it all. And if you start to do that, and then like 1.1 here, it just be gently self-critical throughout everything to understand that it all can get figured out, but don't forget that. Like it's one thing to kind of make something; it's another thing to know that somebody's going to try and possess it.
So before opening the floor for other questions, I would like to take a moment to share my gratitude to the person who made today possible. His name is Luke Davis, the author. and an educator, based in Kathmandu, Nepal, known for his children's literature and deep connection to Nepali culture. He has written works such as The Magical Monkey of Swayambhu and The Legend of Magic, blending rich local heritage inspired by his life in Nepal. And as a matter of fact, he's launching a new book at this very venue later today. So if you guys are free, please, I invited them all. Please join. And thank you, Luke, for introducing Alec to us. And can we have Khada and Topi for Luke, please? Luke, do you want to say a few words?
Sure, thank you, Anil. Thank you for the kata and the topi. Kushi lagyo. So happy that so many of you have come to see Alec speak today, that you have taken the time to really learn from a master, someone who has so much experience and knowledge about storytelling, and has really just given generously of his time. We just did a wonderful magical mystery tour through Nepal, seeing some of the jungles of Pokhara, Chitwan, and the mountains, and it was a really, really cool experience. And yeah, he has a lot to share, and I'm glad you've made the time to be here. Thank you, Anil, for all you're doing. I hope that you continue to keep writing and keep creating yourselves and sharing the miracles that is Nepal. There is so much to offer in this place. Of course, there's the physical elements, but beyond that, it is a land of self-discovery where so many people learn so much more about themselves. And as Alex said, it's really, writing is a spiritual journey as well. So for you to kind of go through that yourselves and share that with others, I think is just such a powerful thing to do. So thank you for kind of engaging in that journey, individually and collectively. And yes, please do come to the book launch today. It's at 2 o'clock. It tries to bring some of those concepts or principles to life. It's called Magic and the Yeti, The Journey Within. And basically, my protagonist, my monkey from the first 2 books, has to learn how to tame his monkey mind from a spiritual Yeti master up in the Himalayas. So it's more of a graphic novel, a little bit of a different style. And a lot of it was inspired by, obviously, my teachers in Nepal and my connections here, and also my journey with Alec as well. So thank you, Alec, thank you, Anil, and hope to see you.
Right, and by the way, if you don't know, the reason why I'm really here is because we're trying to turn Luke's books into an animated movie. And that's actually, in a perfect world, which we know doesn't exist, but in a perfect world, we will be finding a way to make this movie in the coming months and years, and we'll be making, a big chunk of it here. That's kind of like, that's my approach.
The opportunity for the animators in all departments, right? Okay, now we'd like to open the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Our mic will reach you. You can ask in Nepali, we'll translate, no problem. If you're comfortable in English, please do so.
Hello, Alec. I'm Nuera, and I'm doing animation. So I don't know if this question was asked before, but I'm a bit curious. When did you realize that you wanted to do this screenwriting, or you wanted to jump in this field? Because most of us, I'm sure, like we jumbled up, like we were so confused and studied different faculty and then realized that animation is the thing. So what inspired?
All right, great question, right? And I studied communications at university, and I did not know that. I grew up in a household, in a very rarefied childhood, I believe. I was in New York City. My dad worked in publishing and in the art world, And my mom, you know, well, she went back to work at a certain point, but she ran Warner Brothers on the East Coast of America. She covered all of Broadway and all the publishing and all that stuff. So the dining room dinner conversation when they were both home was about movies and TV and stuff. And so, like, I understood, and then they brought us to a lot of things. And so I saw people whose names I would see on the screen. So I understood that they were real people and that it wasn't just like this magic, you know? No offense, Luke. But I went through university and I didn't know that this is what I was going to do. And I studied communications. The school I went to offered a bunch of film theory classes, and I would take those classes, and all of my friends were thinking I was just kind of wasting my time and just kind of screwing off. But to me, I didn't have the consciousness yet, but it's what I was drawn to. I didn't write my first screenplay till out of college, and what I did learn in college, and it's going to sound like a joke, but it isn't, is I was a horrible test taker, but I loved writing term papers. And one of my great accomplishments in college is I once handed in the same term paper to 3 different courses and got like an A and a B and a C. And so I think I was always a creative writer and I didn't know it. And then when I got out and the proverbial frying pan of life hit me in the face, I spent like 2 years saying, I'm trying to be a writer. I'm trying to be a writer. And finally somebody, and it's very Yoda-like, is like, don't try, do, right? Like, it's like, you know, and so when you're young, you want validation and you want somebody to say you're on the right path. And what I was getting from the work I was doing, including from my folks, they told me, like, we wanted to hate the first things you wrote, because then we'd be like, go to law school, you know? And they're like, but we didn't hate it, and so we can't tell you no, you know? I do think it's really important, I don't know about any of you guys, but, you know, it's very important for me that my parents approved of what I was trying to do. And both on a practical level, sometimes they would help me financially, but on a spiritual level, it was really important. It still is. My mom's 90, and I give her everything I ever write, and say, what do you think, you know? And that there's a fragility in there. So I would say it wasn't until after mid-20s. The 20s are a horrible decade when you're an artist. They're probably the worst decade you'll have because everybody you know and love that isn't an artist is living a life that feels like there's forward momentum, right? There's institutional, like, pats on the head. There's a raise, or there's I'm going to graduate school, or any of these things. And when you're an artist, you're just alone, and you're not. It may take years to get what you want, and those are years where everybody that loves you is going to tell you what you need to do, but only you know inside what you need to do. And art is passion. It's not logic. There's no. So one of my kids is a professional musician, and he's picked up a guitar when he was 4, and he's 26, and he's a professional musician. That's what he is. And every once in a while, it craps about money, and I'm like, or craps about music and Spotify and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, Eli, you can never play music again. What are you gonna do? And he's like, I play music. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So shut up and keep going. You know?
Hi, Alec. Right. Right. So I'm a screenwriter myself, early in the career. So I have a couple of questions. I think I'll take a lot of time. I want to talk about writer's block for a while. I feel like my writer's block usually comes from me wrestling with the concept of originality, right? Because so much of consumption is in us that, and I heard you say that you're a process-driven guy. So have you found any process to explore or find originality in your work when you don't see it? Second question is, what is the secret to making a character likable in the script? Because if you look at a character like Woody, right? So there's a lot of negative emotions there, a lot of insecurity. But how do you Like, what would be the basis of likability for those characters? And finally, I want to talk about hero journey. And what is the significance of denying the call to action? Because that's the part that I don't get the most. Like, I know that we need it. It doesn't work when it's not there, but I don't know why. So those are 3 questions.
I may need to get proctored on the 3 questions, but I'll start with writer's block, right? I think Mark Twain once said that it's easy to quit smoking, he quits every night. You know, I think writing, like, it's okay to quit if it's not flowing. It's okay to, like, walk away, to take a nap, to take a walk, to do something else. Try and, like, reduce the pressure on being smart or a genius or special, right? But my salvation has always been, you know, the reservoir of movies and stories I keep in my head. If I struggling somewhere and I'm like, I can't figure it out, I'm like, well, how did that movie figure it out? Or and that starts giving me a little bit of a path. And then I also always fall back on character. And I'm like, who is this character and what does this character need? And if I'm not getting it, if I'm forcing something that's not working, I just kind of say, all right, maybe that's not what this character needs. It'd be easy to say I don't have writer's block. I tend to just, like, be playful in my head, but I walk away a lot, like in the middle of the day, if I'm frustrated, because I assume when I come back I'll be thinking something different. So that's one. The denial of the call. It can just be a moment. You know, like in the first Star Wars, you know, old Ben Kenobi says, Luke, you're the Luke, right? Here's your lightsaber. And Luke is like, I can't use this. And yes, you can, right? That was it, right? That was the denial of the call, right? So I think it's important because you, from a purely, like, technical point of view, you want to have a place to watch that character grow. And so you need to have that moment, and it could be longer than a moment, but that moment of the character not believing in themselves or not thinking that they can do something, because then it creates this little vacuum of storytelling that allows the growth to happen. Where, like, if you think about the cause and effect for an audience, we're manipulating an audience, right? So we want them to go on that nice algorithm of manipulation. I think it's just important. What was the third one?
The secret to making a character.
Oh, okay. So the most unlikable character you will ever create doesn't know he's unlikable or she's unlikable, right? That character thinks they're okay, right? That character thinks that they're heroes, you know. In the case of Woody, you know, we made a point of showing both. How do you meet Woody? You meet him almost as a father figure saying, everything's gonna be okay, everything's gonna be okay, everybody. So that's likable, right? The empathy that he has in those little moments before they realize it's Andy's party, or, you know, before everybody goes crazy. But then the second thing that we did very quickly is we showed the hierarchy in Andy's room of whatever toy was on the bed was the favorite toy. And when Woody got put into that box, that little toy chest, and he had that little moment of vulnerability, that was enough for him, right? That was the vulnerability of, like, oh, he's realizing something. And that allowed, I think, you to like a lot of the bad stuff. Going back to, like, the first draft, so we get hired, and Disney says, I didn't finish this thing, Disney says, you know, Pixar skews young, these aren't toys, these aren't children, these are grown-ups, right? And, you know, what is Woody? He's a cowboy, it's an American archetype. And in American culture, there was a TV show in the 50s called The Howdy Doody Show that had a cowboy puppet. And then what is Buzz? He's a spaceman, another American archetype. And in the 70s, after the moon launch and everything, that's like another thing, right? And so, like, we're dealing with, like, ideas that, like, they're grown-ups emotionally. Woody is especially. We wrote in the first draft of Toy Story, it's the first thing that got cut out, we wrote like a 2-page montage of like 30 years or 20 years of Woody's personal abandonment, right? We wrote it and it won't necessarily translate here, but he was a toy for a kid. The kid grew up, was going to be on, there was a big TV show in America called The Ed Sullivan Show. He was going to be a ventriloquist puppet. The kid grew up to be a ventriloquist. He was going to be on the show, but it's the day that the Beatles came, and then the guy didn't get on the show, and he got drunk, and he left Woody in the back of a cab, and then the cab driver brought him home, and his kid took him, and his kid loved him, and then his kid ended up at Woodstock, and then Woody got left in the mud, and then like somebody got him, and then he brought him home, and his kid loved him, but somehow he ended up on the floor of a disco, and then Andy got him, right? We wrote all of that. It's not in the movie, but it informed us that he's got separation and abandonment anxiety, and that's what's going to drive every one of his decisions. But in that first draft, because we wrote this wooden policeman script, because it had so much violence, it was still out there, we were told, you're not writing an animation movie, you're not writing a kids movie, you know, have violence, have cursing, do whatever you want, you're writing an R-rated movie, right? And we did have all of that. And in fact, when Buzz showed up, Woody tried to kill Buzz, you know, and then when Buzz later on in the storytelling realized he was just a toy and not the real Buzz Lightyear, he put his finger in a light socket. And, you know, no, right? It's funny, right? But the Disney executives like, this is great. Now we get rid of everything, right? Now we understand, you're right. So just humanize your antagonist and humanize and understand everybody carries fear and vulnerability. And if you can just create those little moments, you know, that's great. And if not, you know, if you have a Darth Vader, the vulnerability didn't come until much later in his storytelling.
Hi Alec, I'm Tasu. I'm currently learning FX, and my question is, whenever the budget is limited in a project, we can see its effect on animation, lighting, FX, etc. So, what would be its effect on screenwriting or writing when the budget is limited?
Did everybody see the movie Flow? Right? I love that movie. Man, I watched that movie like 5 times. I love that movie. Open source animation, low budget, took several years to make. What did they do? I don't know, I actually don't know their process, but how I possess it, no dialogue, and kind of impressionistic writing, right? What happens in Flow just sort of happens, right? There wasn't a need to like preach or tell you what to think. It just happened, and then I believe they used Unreal. I don't know what they used. If it was it was Unreal, right? So Unreal doesn't do faces good, right? Like there's this like weird paradox in technology where the more human the machines try and make characters, the less alive they feel, in my opinion. And so what did they do in Flow? They had the characters' movements seem so real, right? It was so like watch the cat or the dog or whatever just kind of move. They found their value in the storytelling or that's where they doubled down, I believe. But the faces, the eyes were never gonna get to a certain place, and so they just said, well, we're not gonna tell the story that way, right? We're gonna tell it the way we're gonna tell it. And to me, it was my favorite movie of last year.
I'm sure that you would agree that cinema, inclusive of all its characters and the plot, all boils down to human behavior. And we spent 2 years in order to make a 2-hour film in an attempt to elicit a 2-second response in a human being in order to take the message from that spiritual journey that the protagonist is going through. But since the advent of cinema, we have been making films, and all the directors at the powerful positions have been trying to channelize what they have learned in their life, and they are just trying to make an impact. And there are a few like moments or scenes in the films, where we all resonate with them, but are we really trying to make an attempt to create an impact among the mass audiences by making a film when you are at a powerful position, or is it just a subjective itch to satisfy our ego when we are making a film or writing a story?
I don't want to like speak
like a llama, but I will say that ego is the death of serenity, maybe, of peace. We're all creatures with ego. And, movies don't have to exist. They exist because of ego. They exist because somebody wants them to exist, right? Somebody believes they're going to be important. TV used to be different before streaming. TV is like filling time, and movies are creating time. And so there's a whole different way of looking at it. I didn't quite understand everything, but to say, I believe, and it was something that I was taught early in my career, that like the goal as an artist in animation, or the goal as an artist in general in the electric arts, is to not make money, but to make moments. And you're just trying to make the right moments. And if you do that, I believe, and you're open-minded, you'll find that your ego kind of dissipates and kind of disappears, because you're in service of something much bigger than yourself. And as far as like, I didn't quite understand the other thing, but as far as like, should movies exist, or why they're 2 hours long to get like a little moment, I don't know. Like, movies may not exist in the future. I don't know. I do know that like what they mean now, more than other art forms, more than other electronic art forms, movies tend to maintain their inherent intentional value through time and space, for whatever reason. One of my favorite movies ever is a 1925 Buster Keaton comedy called Sherlock Jr. I can watch that movie today and still have the reactions and the possession of it that he intended 100 years ago. And you can't do that with a lot of TV shows, and you can't do that with a lot of video games. You can't do that with like other electronic arts as purely. So I don't know why that is, and maybe I'm unique in that, but I don't think I am.
I think you also need to ask, do you make movies, or in the context of this conversation, do you write for yourself or for the audience?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand it. I write for myself because I have a daily need to find purpose and virtue. I write for the audience because the rent comes due. I'm serious. Like that's the first of the month shows up a lot, and so when I have lectured emerging artists, I've made the point of saying there's a big difference between writing and writing for a living. Writing for a living, when that's your primary source of income, there's a lot of different pressures and all of these things. And so I've always kind of taken this approach that I am in an industry and I am in an art form that does, I've written 80 or so screenplays, 75 or 80 screenplays. I think 8 have been made, that's a lot of failure. Right? That's a lot of like the screenplay, the stuff on the page has no inherent value to me once it's done, unless it goes through the camera and ends up on a screen, But of those 80, I have been paid to write 70 of them, or whatever the number is. And so I kind of am like, I'm in the Alec Sokolow business, and that's how I kind of look at it. So I am always writing for somebody else, I hope. But no, I write, it's gonna sound horrible, but I kind of write because like, I'd kill myself otherwise. Like I don't know what else to do. Like I'm not qualified. I've tried to quit. Like I've done the resume. They're like, you have no management skills and you don't have a graduate degree. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm a writer, like that's, so I think it's passion, and passion doesn't make sense.
Hi, Alec. So I wanted to ask you, What kind of audience group do you target when you write? I know you obviously just said that you write for yourself, but if you are writing for the audience, what would be the best target group that you would write, or anyone should be writing to maybe have a meaningful impact on the society?
All right, so in America right now, the only people who still go to theaters, by and large, are people under 18 and people over 60, right? So you learn to adapt if you want to have opportunity. So you tend to write for those audiences if you can. You tend to write characters that those audiences might like. Or you tend to try and grab onto pre-existing IP, because in America, they value that a lot. And so what do I think? I think if you can entertain a child and their parent, you're in good shape, you know, or their grandparent, you know, you're in good shape.
Hello, Alec. I'm Lisa. I wanted to ask, when developing a story, how do you decide when you've written too much or added too many details into your story and you have to cut parts of it?
So I said it before, but play the game. It's a little mental game. Play the game with yourself. Would anybody miss this if it was gone? Just ask yourself that question, right? You know, what I would tell you is don't give your work to family or friends and expect an honest answer. So then perhaps find a stranger you respect or somebody that has no reason to be nice to you, and then try to, and when you get feedback, ask yourself or ask that person, why are you giving me that feedback? Not what the feedback is. Most people don't necessarily know the note they're giving. It's their version of something, but behind it is a motivation. I didn't like that for A, B, or C. So ask the question, why am I getting a note? But also ask yourself, would anybody miss it if it was gone? And does the story still tell?
You know, when there's not enough events or details in the story, you know, I mean, when there's a lot more, but how do you know if it's not enough?
So, you know, again, screenwriting is very formulaic, and depending on the studio that I would go to work with, sometimes in the contract, they tell you how long it has to be. You know, when you do animation, they kind of want the scripts between 85 and 90 pages because for, you know, younger audiences, more showings, the whole thing. Warner Brothers, in the contract, I don't know, I haven't worked for them for a couple of years, but like, they used to say, like, you can't be longer than 115 pages. So if you're like 80 pages, chances are you need to find something. And if you're 120 pages, chances are you need to cut something, right? But, you know, I don't know, you know, things are what they're supposed to be, right? Things are what they are.
Hi, Alec, I'm here. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, sorry. So my name is Yojana, I'm also a screenwriter. I just wanted to ask you, how much of you reflects on the character you write? Not just in terms of character traits, but also in terms of beliefs and opinion, because I feel like my problem is, sometimes I feel like the character I'm working on, it's too me, you know, and it's okay if it reflects in overall stories. I feel it's okay if the overall story or reflects the opinion of a director, a creator, a writer. That's how we get great propaganda movies. But I think, how do you find a balance to not make it, or it's okay, I'm overthinking it?
You're not overthinking it. You have to write what you know, right? You have to write from that place of authority. You can't fake that and I think have it resonate. But I don't know what it's like to be a toy, but I know what it's like to be a younger brother and an older brother. I know what it's like to be discarded. I know what it's like to think I'm better than I really am, you know? And so I put myself into everything in some way, but I also try to see the world from the character's point of view as much as I can, and then try to reach an expectation that I have for the history of those archetypes as they're told. Like, you know, so the prequel, the Pippi Longstocking thing, the producers wanted to be Pirates of the Caribbean. There's like an issue with the Pippi Longstocking estate where you can't actually use Pippi in the movie. So I look at Pirates of the Caribbean and I think, why did I like that? You know, and somewhere in there, I think I lose myself in it, but I relate to every character. I've never written thinking about an actor specifically past maybe a line here or there. I relate to like I just pretend like what would it feel like to be that, but I think you can never lose your personal connection, and at the same time it's all make-believe, so you just have to start playing games to get yourself out of the way.
Hello Alec, I hope it's going great. My question to you is very simple, and sorry if it sounds a bit rude, but how has AI changed the way you work, if you use it at all? And my another question is, who is your favorite director that you have worked with?
So AI is reality. It's another tool in the box. I use ChatGPT as kind of a writer's assistant. I never thought I would. I love it because, so I heard this thing, I think I said it to Luke, you might have heard this. You've heard everything I have to say in the last week. But, somebody said, how do I make a choice in life? And I flip a coin. And when the coin's up in the air, I know what side I want it to land on, right? And that's how I make my choice. And I look at AI like that. Sometimes, for me, I get stuck and in simply writing the proctor of like, I'm stuck here, I'm looking for A, B, and C, I find my answer, right? It's just it's like another friend in the room. That's for me. For the greater industry, AI is an existential threat to individual artists. It's a huge threat to visual, special effects already in America. And when you read that Disney's spending $1 billion of development, they're not doing that because they're nice. They're doing that because they ultimately want to they want to make things more efficient, right? That's the word that's gonna, there's probably a couple things that will end humanity. Efficiency is one of them. And so like, so it's evil, but it's here. And, it's kind of like global warming. Like you could be against it, but enjoy it while it's here, So I would say use it ethically if you can, and understand that it should never replace your humanity. And as long as you're using it and it's not using you, then chances are you'll find the right balance. From a writing point of view, what's the difference between that and Google, or that and the Oxford English Dictionary, or that and reading a book? I'm still trying to find something. It's made it easier for me to find it, but I don't look at it as, it's not going to replace me. It's just going to change things. And when you actually look at AI animation, because I know a bunch of people who are like, oh, you should see what this can do. Right now, I think maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years and younger won't know the difference. But if you get to 6 years old, you know the difference, right? It's not very good right now, but it will be, right? It's the cow's out of the barn there, right? Like this is reality. And I tend to look at it like it's just another tool, and yet, what's the phrase? Like, it's really good for an artist to feel the suffering of your creation. And I would almost say, don't ever become lazy on that.
Given your recent revelations about how things function in Hollywood, especially in terms of how things work out there, were you ever concerned about how your story would end in terms of end result? Like, for example, I think 1989 Little Mermaid, the 2D version, seemed a lot more better than the one that was released in 2020, the CGI version. So were you ever kind of concerned about where your story would end up?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much you don't control, and I kind of believe inherently, it's just like, there's something incredibly vulgar about remakes and about sequels. You know, like the first movie, Toy Story may be its own unique creature, but, you know, I was talking to somebody before, and I think it's fair to say, when Pixar is making a movie every 2 years, they vetted their movies a lot internally, like more holistically than when they're popping one out a year. And I think that like the uniqueness and quality starts to get compromised in some way. And so I always ask myself, like, has it earned the right to exist? And when you look at like the Little Mermaid remake or the Lion King that was like live action, to me it's like, you know, it doesn't inherently have to exist. It's just there to make more money. It's there to like kind of like just grease the wheels of their corporate quarterly earnings or whatever, and it's vulgar. From an artist's point of view, if they called me up and said, we want to do Toy Story as a live action, we want you to write it, I'd say, all right, when do I show up? You know, like, because it's work. But it does affect, I think, your aspiration for something. And I also think the way things end, you know, if it feels, it's just a feeling thing, right? Like if it feels like that's what it should always have been, then you're in a good place. And if not, then you're doing it for other reasons, or it's being done for other reasons that are beyond you. But I can be very critical of Hollywood. I think America, and this is not a political thing, it's a philosophical thing. I think America is eating itself in such a horrible way culturally, and you know, and then the machines come in, and then the platforms of come in, and then the algorithms come in, and humanity gets lost, and the mysteries of life get lost. And I think it's never been more important to try and tell an authentic story, however you find that, you know. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's kind of that's what I believe, you know.
Hello, Alec. My question is about character. When you have made clear that character is the focus point when you are writing, but I wanted to know how much control do you want to keep over your story, and how much you just discover why you're writing. Because when you watch a lot of interviews about screenwriting, you have a lot of screenwriters who just say they start writing and they discover stuff and they just follow along and discover new things. But I feel like when I'm writing, I've spent so much time thinking about everything that by the time I start writing, I feel I already know pretty much everything. And sometimes I realize while I write that something is not quite working, but I have the feeling that I want to keep control over the character and not just develop and discover the character. So how do you let a character develop while you're writing and discover who he is and so on? I always felt it's a bit going out of hand and out of control if I do that.
All right, so I do think writing, all art is a journey of discovery, and that you have to be open, you channel something to get there. But you know, to infinity and beyond, right? Like, so where does infinity exist? And we talked about, Luke and I have talked about this. Where does infinity exist? How do you define infinity? And I heard somebody talk about this once, that if you take any measurement and keep just going in half, and in half, and in half, and in half, you'll never get to the edge. There'll always be a little space. You can call it negative energy, you can call it dark matter, whatever. There'll always be something else, and that's infinity, right? That is it. You can never do that. I think writing and structure is like that. You create the structure to create the borders, and then you find your infinity, you find your creativity, you find everything in those borders. You know, a jazz master once said, "There's only 12 notes. It's how you play them." you know? So you just got to figure out how to play them in a way that creates a sense of immediacy and vibrancy and surprise and discovery, but you're also like creating the parameters of your story. And so I think developing and committing to the development high up in the process should free you to then just go wherever you go within that. You know, so I think it's both, if that makes sense. And so if you're feeling like you're front-loading things and that you're not finding things, I would say, okay, but perhaps that just means that you are more result-driven than journey-driven, if that makes sense. I mean, I say, enjoy the journey, enjoy the suffering of that journey.
Hi, Alec. So I've got a couple of questions that's interrelated. So I do animations and storyboards. So I wanted to talk about the synergy between a director and a storyboarder, or the storyboarder and the screenplay writer. And like sometimes as a storyboarder, I face like when you start boarding the words in a screenplay, you visualize it in a different angle, right? Sometimes and sometimes there are instances where the script does have dialogue, but the emotional state of the character can be a couple of things. Like the decision making of the character is not narrow enough. It is written down, but it is not clear enough, you might say sometimes, yeah. And you are in the, when you board something, yeah, you are in the moment, you are in the character, and you are feeling the character. And how much, I wanted to ask, like how much back and forth or push and pull there is between these kind of roles, and how do you strengthen the synergy between these kinds of like screenwriter and the storyboarder? And my second question is how much you explain your emotional state of the character through dialogue or through like you might say like narration or explanation, you might say.
Yeah, all right, so somebody asked me my favorite director, and the favorite director I've ever worked with, is Roland Joffe. And I made a movie with him. Nobody saw it. When we had the opening, I was sitting next to my agent, and the lights came on, and I'm like, what'd you think? And he's like, it's not gonna hurt you. And I'm like, that's a weird thing to say. But he was wonderful because his spirit of exploration was so infectious. I couldn't wait to show up every day and work with him. So, and that then trips into what you're saying, and it's collaboration, and it's the idea of the journey we go on together. So everybody's doing different things. And I don't look at the written word in any script I've ever written as written in stone, and I don't see it as anything but a prototype that will then lead to magic, hopefully, and that means I've got to let go and somebody else has to find their magic. So when it comes to storyboarding, or when it comes to production design, or it comes, there are big conversations. Perspective is a really big one, right? And the world building is a really big one. But I feel like I've never been disappointed when I've let somebody be creative. I've never felt I wasn't heard or my words were co-opted when somebody gets more excited than I do, right? And so I think that the real game for everybody in this room and everybody that is in the creative workplace is to trust the process of collaboration. And when it veers, be gentle in your criticism and understand, people are just trying their best to communicate something. If you're not getting it, ask why'd you write that? And just ask the question, but then hopefully have the freedom to take chances. The worst thing you can do to a creative process is create expectations that have people kind of just color in the lines. Anybody can, the AI is gonna do that. So that's what I would say, both as a writer and when I've also kind of been a director, I am always in the belief that we are better together than apart, which means I gotta get out of your way. I gotta hopefully make you better. And so hopefully that's the culture that you guys will play with and create as you move forward.
Thank you, Alec, for all your insights and for answering all our questions with so much patience and virtue. And we are really honored to have you here and to be able to spend this much time with you. And to just as a gesture, our team has brought in a little gift for you. And I would like to ask AVAAN's president, Mr. Bikram Manandar, to hand it over to you.